Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. Speaking to the US media today, the author E. Jean Carroll says she'd like to give some of her $83 million that she won in the defamation case against Donald Trump to something that he hates. Well, while we've been watching events in Washington this last hour, crucial development in Northern Ireland tonight. The leader of the DUP, Jeffrey Donaldson, has been meeting with executive members of his party to discuss a possible deal to restore power sharing at Stormont next week. The DUP collapsed the executive nearly 2 years ago in protest at the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The party's been in talks with the UK government this past year, seeking changes to the so-called Windsor framework, and it would seem there's been enough progress to put something to the wider party. There are around 130 members of the executive. The party officers not present at this meeting tonight, and only they would have the power to sign off on a prospective deal. So let's bring in our Ireland correspondent, Chris Page. Just talk to me about that bit. So this is the wider group of the executive, Chris. But I guess if they row in behind Jeffrey Donaldson, then he's in business.
Yes, you do get the sense that we're arriving at something of a political pivot point in this process. It is almost 2 years since the Democratic Unionist Party, in effect, collapsed the power-sharing regional government here in Northern Ireland over its concerns about trading arrangements brought in after Brexit. Unionists are opposed to the fact that Northern Ireland is under different rules to the rest of the UK. In effect, Northern Ireland has remained in the EU single market for goods, and unionists would say that creates an economic border between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. So Sir Geoffrey does seem to be inching his party towards restoring the devolved government in Belfast. However, he is facing some opposition both within his party and from more hardline unionists outside. So you can see here there is a group of about 50 demonstrators outside the venue where that meeting of the DUP party executive has been held. As DUP members were arriving in their cars, the protesters were shouting at them, urging to, in their words, do the right thing. Something hasn't gone particularly to plan for Jeffrey Donaldson tonight. This was supposed to be a confidential party meeting, but it has been, in effect, tweeted out on social media. A running commentary is being given by a blogger who is an opponent of Sir Geoffrey's apparent plans to restore power sharing. So Sir Geoffrey certainly is facing a bit of a struggle to make his case for a return to power sharing on the basis of what he has secured, the concessions he has secured from the UK government. And it is expected that he will speak to the media sometime in the next 2 hours. The legal deadline for the restoration of Stormont is next Thursday, so there is a bit of time, and it seems that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson feels he's got as much as he's going to get from the UK government now, and he's trying to get his wider party to agree.
Yeah, I mean, there are two camps here, aren't there, Chris? The people behind you want to know that the internal market is secure and that nothing gets in the way of the internal UK market. And then there is the wider Northern Ireland public who can see a financial package that would come to Northern Ireland if Stormont was returned. And that is crucially important, of course, when salaries need to be paid and we're in a cost of living crisis.
That's right. The UK government, we know, has dangled a financial package worth £3.3 billion sterling to try to, as it were, help the DUP get back into the regional government at Stormont, allow the regional government to be resurrected. All the other four main parties in Northern Ireland say they want the regional government to be reformed immediately. They say that major decisions aren't being made, that it's having an impact on public services in Northern Ireland. And as you say, we've had a series of strikes in recent months from public sector workers who say that their pay has fallen well behind workers in the rest of the UK. So parties like the biggest party now in the Northern Ireland Assembly, the Irish Nationalist Party, Sinn Féin, say that the time for a decision by the DUP is well past. But Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, the DUP leader, has said his party alone will make its own mind up about this. This process of consulting, as it were, party members is a vital part of the process. And his argument that he has been using, particularly since about October, November time, has been that the best way to secure Northern Ireland's place in the UK in the long term is for unionists to be involved in governing Northern Ireland. So he thinks having the regional government back, that is what will ultimately secure the union. But he's adamant that he does need the right deal. And I think over the next few days, we will see if this deal is going to be enough to get the wider DUP party to get behind any plan to restore power sharing here in Belfast.
Chris Page in Northern Ireland, important event this evening. We'll watch that closely in Belfast. Thank you very much for the moment. Let me just bring in our panel on that. I mean, clearly, if the Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Steele was going to call elections, fresh elections, after everything that's gone on over the last 2 years, politically the DUP would be in a much weaker position. And as Chris was just saying, from Jeffrey Donaldson's point of view, probably it is time for the good of the party to get back into Stormont.
Yeah, I think Jeffrey Donaldson is quite a sensible politician and would like to go back into power sharing. And I think it's very important the Assembly does get up and running again for all sorts of reasons. But underlying this problem, Christian, of course, is the fact that we left the customs union when we left the EU, which we didn't even need to do at the time. And I just wish that politicians, and particularly maybe the Labour Party, would look again at whether we shouldn't be going back into the customs union, because that would solve this problem at a stroke. And it would also benefit the people of Northern Ireland in terms of their economy and their wealth. Yeah,
that wouldn't get in the way of some of the trade deals that the British government wants to secure. I mean, I'm thinking principally in terms of the deal they're talking about at the moment with Canada, which of course has been held up by hormone-grown beef. That's the sort of beef that wouldn't be able to go across a border from Northern Ireland into the south. So you wouldn't be able to do a deal with Canada, would you?
No, I think you've got to think that all trade deals are good, particularly one with the US would be particularly good. But the fact is that Europe remains our biggest trading partner, and Brexit has done nothing but damage that relationship, particularly the trading goods as opposed to services. And I just think that we didn't need to leave the customs union, and we should look seriously at rejoining, because otherwise I don't see there's a solution to this problem in Ireland, actually, with a border down the Irish Sea.
Kelly, there would be a lot of people who will be pleased to see this in your neck of the woods. I remember last year, I think there were about 200 senators in Congress, men and women came over who have a stake, ancestry in Ireland, and have a stake in what was going on, and of course are such fierce defenders of the Good Friday Agreement.
That's definitely key. It'll be also interesting to hear his remarks after this meeting, to hear how it spun, what exactly happened, because from what I see, that people weren't going to be talking to the media, so that he's going to go out front and kind of tell it. But I think it's key to think about the people in Northern Ireland and how this is going to affect them, how that's going to make life easier or better or worse for them. And I think that's key, and that's really important to consider, of the ramifications of affecting the people from Northern Ireland.
OK, we'll watch that closely. More on that on the BBC webpage. Of course, you'll be able to find it there, and Chris Page is filing for that. So I'm just looking at it. So there will be updates through the evening. Let's talk about what happened in the States today, because the US media have been hearing from E. Jean Carroll, the author and journalist who last week was awarded $83 million in damages in a defamation case she brought against Donald Trump. Ms. Carroll said Trump had raped her in a department store in the mid-1990s and then defamed her when he later denied the claim. The jury had already found Trump liable for sexual abuse and on Friday awarded her significant punitive damages and a figure 8 times higher than what she initially sought in her lawsuit. In her interview with CBS News, she spoke about that moment when she walked into the courtroom and was confronted by the former president.
Oddly enough, the minute I saw him in the courtroom, and Robbie was standing here, and she said, "Good morning, Miss Carroll. Would you please spell your name for the court?" And there he is, and it turns out he's nothing. The fear lifted and just went away. It just was gone, because he's nothing. He was nothing. I was terrified all the time. He is nothing.
Yeah, she says she's going to give some of the money that she won in that court case to abused women and to charities that look after abused women. Kelly, I thought what was really interesting is the response we got this weekend from Nikki Haley, because she was put on the spot about this and asked about the sexual abuse case. And from her perspective, she's clearly, I mean, she needs to because she's trailing in South Carolina, but she's shifted. She said, I absolutely trust the jury. I don't think it should take him off the ballot, but I agree with the jury. I respect the jury. And there are women in the electorate who don't like how he is talking about E. Jean Carroll. And that's precisely the point, isn't it? That he has used it as a campaign strategy. But there are lots of suburban women who don't take kindly to the sort of things he says about her.
Yes, and that's one of the key takeaways from this trial. When we have to look at it, we also have to look at the fact that the jury came back in less than 3 hours. Talk about sending a message and also giving more money than they asked for, $83.3 million. In the U.S., we live in a democracy, and that is key. And ultimately, it's up to the jury based on the facts and evidence to make a determination. But also, Trump has a right to appeal that verdict as well. And he stated that he will appeal that verdict. It's also interesting to note that when you appeal it, that you need to put the money up that amount or a bond, because in the other case where she was awarded the $5 million, Trump put that money up. Now, it'll be interesting to see if he tries to post a bond for the $83 million or if he puts all that money up in the court system until the appeal works its way through the court system.
Does it alarm you as a woman that there are some who do kiss the ring? I'm thinking of the likes of Elise Stefanik, who wants to become vice president, who find it impossible to talk about this case and would side with Donald Trump rather than a woman who a jury of your peers have found he sexually abused?
As a woman, we should support women, and it takes a lot of courage to come forward. But we also not have to think about her, but the other women, the multiple women that came forward and made allegations against Donald Trump as well for what occurred and what they went through physically. And so I think that's really important to remember that. But there are some women that discard that and will still go to the polls and vote for him.
I should just correct myself, actually. I think I said guilty. I of course, means liable because it is a civil case. We should make the differentiation. It was a civil case, this, in which he was found liable of sexual abuse. Christopher Steele, I hesitate to ask you about legal cases involving Donald Trump, because I know there's one you can't talk about, and it's one you're involved with, and we don't have a verdict in that. But do you see similarities and crossover between what she has experienced and what you have experienced in your legal tangling with Donald Trump?
Yes, of course we do. I mean, we can talk about the case that he launched against us in Florida, where there was a judgment the other year in which it was very clear that the judge thought he was abusing the legal system, that he wasn't serious about actually pursuing any kind of legal grievance, but was purely pursuing a political campaign against his perceived enemies. And I think the problem with Donald Trump generally is he thinks he's above the law. And the trouble is that a lot of people in his Congress and his party also think he's above the law, whereas in fact it's absolutely cardinal in a democracy where the rule of law is king, that everybody is subject to the rule of law and everyone should respect judges and should respect the verdicts that come down from juries in these cases. And clearly that isn't happening here with E. Jean Carroll.
Just very quickly on that, Chris. I mean, in terms of the cases that is brought against you, you said you'd won one in Florida, but I know you're fighting one here at the High Court in London. Presumably, he has the backing, he has the liquidity to be able to bring these cases, but he's taking on smaller people who don't, like E. Jean Carroll, like yourself.
Well, absolutely. I mean, fortunately, for most of these cases, we've been insured, but we're not always insured, and that makes us very vulnerable. And of course, it's not just the money or the stress of that. It's also the general psychological pressure that it brings to you. It's the fact that you get trolled, you get harassed and so on social media and in and around your office at times and the like. It's a very unpleasant experience to go through. So I do very much sympathise with E. Jean Carroll, and I'm very glad she's come through this. She's an incredibly brave woman.
OK, we will leave that there. We'll get a short break. At the other side of the break, of course, we'll get the stories from the panel across the world and here in the UK. You're watching BBC News.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK.
Usually, sorting a day out takes Gary Flint a lot of planning. But he's not had nearly as much work to do before coming to Castleton.
Normally, I would have to do a bit of research online, or quite extensive research online, to actually make the day pleasurable for myself and any family member that I'll be with.
It's because a new map has been produced. On it is clearly marked where facilities are for disabled people, like accessible toilets, special parking, and where wheelchair hire is. The Park Authorities teamed up with Accessible UK to produce this map.
It isn't rocket science, and that's the big thing that we need to get across. This is quite basic information.
It's hoped that Castleton can become an example to other places.
For more stories from across the UK, head to the BBC News website.
Right, it is time for the panel. With you. Do you know I've learned something today? When they told me what your story was, I couldn't quite believe that we've never actually caught on camera the birth of a great white shark. Is that right? We've never seen an infant great white shark.
That is correct. To see something like this, I don't know about you, but some people are actually afraid of sharks, and I am one of them, but to see them from far distance and to see something like this, because it's a big mystery exactly what happens, where the birth takes place. And this is footage in California of this baby shark. This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, now I'm very much like you. I'm not sure I would want to get close to an angry great white mother who was giving birth. I mean, but maybe that's it. Maybe, but is the suggestion that they go deep, or they go far away when they give birth? Is that what it is?
That's a $64,000 question.
We just don't know.
I have absolutely no idea.
Right. How extraordinary, though, that it's never been caught. And so, and what do we know about this baby? Where is it? What is it? How big is it? How has it been captured?
It was just someone who took a video of it that happened to catch this moment. They believe it's a couple days old. They are not sure. And this occurred in California. So all you California surfers out there, beware.
Yeah, beware. Yeah, just one of those flukes. Lucky for you, it's not in Miami. Let's talk about the RSPB, Chris, as we get rid of the shark from the screen. So have you been out this weekend with the RSPB?
No, what it is, Christian, is that each year in January, the RSPB organises what they call the Big Garden Birdwatch, where just people at home and their families in their gardens observe what's there for an hour and record it and send it in. And it's the biggest survey of wildlife, I think, in this country every year. And this year, for example, over 6.4 million birds have been recorded in people's gardens. And in our own garden, I did cheat a bit because I had the birdsong app on as well, so I could hear them as well as see them. And we recorded 15 species.
Where do you live?
But the fact is,
which county are you in?
Surrey. What's really interesting, Christian, is that the species in the garden have changed over time. Since I was a boy, the birds that you would have seen in the garden 50 years ago have disappeared and new ones have appeared. And it's a really interesting reflection on climate change and how the environment is changing and so on. Because although we have a greater spectrum of birds, and particularly birds of prey, we have less actual birds in the population, which I think is a matter of some concern. But it's a fascinating exercise, as I say. Yeah, no,
I can well imagine it. It's fascinating. Tell me, the birds that you saw, I bet the robin was still there, wasn't it?
The robin was there, but the ones that disappeared
he's an endurer, the robin.
Very aggressively, but the ones that have disappeared from our garden, at least, the sparrows and starlings, which were omnipresent when I was young.
Yeah, they were when I was a kid. Yeah.
But now we have woodpeckers and jays that you'd never have seen, and very colourful they are too. So There's an upside to this, but there's also a downside, which is the number of birds has declined, I think, quite dramatically.
Yeah, indeed so. I do like the robin. He helps me with the gardening. He pulls the worms out as I dig. Very aggressive, as you say, but good fun nonetheless.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you very much for your company this evening. Kelly, Chris, lovely to have you alongside. We will be back, of course, same time tomorrow. Do join us for that. Have a very good evening.